How are you?
You alright?
Settle down.
Yeah, excuse the mess, the place is not the best at the moment, but got a lot of shit going on right now. I'm in the middle of preparing a cake for Tuesday, as you know. And loves me when
Pull up the chair actually.
and tell.
Most of the other flats got horrible mouldy fucking carpet in them. I mean, why do you want to put carpet in a home in Australia? It's just a joke, really.
All the buildings
So
in here, if they're two-bedroom flats of this size, these buildings were built in 1949. So, you know, it's a considerable time ago. So in those days you had nice high ceilings, they weren't such tiny boxy little fucking places, you know. What they build you now, you've got, you know, pretty much half the size really, more scale.
Just don't focus on the mess. That's my first self-portrait.
Who are these people? Who are the girls?
That's a young girl I knew that was a lead singer in a band. That was a girl at a pub. That was a girl at a pub that I took a photo of that just said, alright, well.
Stay there. And you are pushing it. In fact, get up. Come here, dickhead. Now fuck off. Had enough of you. Right, now you can focus on what you're doing because it's fucking distracting me. Alright, now, yeah, look, living under the government as a landlord is living under the worst slumlord in the country. They are slumlords, they're not landlords. They have people living in appalling conditions in this country. And this is a country that's quite wealthy, that should be looking after their more vulnerable. And we're talking old age pensioners, people with disabilities, people with mental health issues, because we don't have hospitals for the mentally ill now. They all get thrown into housing with no follow-up care, which, as you can imagine, causes complete disarray to any community. And they're not looked after either. So it's a nightmare living in housing. And then you also have to bear the reputation that you're bludging off the system because you're being given an income and a house to live in. So therefore you must be a bludger. That's the way Australia looks at things. So then you're looked down upon by the rest of society for where you are through no fault of your own, through an illness, or you're elderly. And a lot of elderly people from that era don't have superannuation to collect, don't have a big fucking nest in at the end of their life, and unless they're given cheap homes to live in, would wind up on the street. And now you'd think if that was the case that they'd at least give you decent housing to live in, as they claim to do. But living in those communities is a far cry from the reality of what they say. Like most of their pamphlets they send out about what housing you're doing and how they're upgrading their systems and so forth, most of the tenants refer to as propaganda pamphlets. Because what they say they're doing on the condition they say they have their tenants in is a far cry from the reality of what they're actually living in.
So what have the conditions been like?
Well, for instance, last year, over the year in 2021, or 2020 and 2021, I had probably 10 dead rats under my floorboards decomposing at different times during that time period. Now it takes about 10 to 14 days, I know because I'm very experienced now, living with the smell of decomposition, thanks to Land and Housing Corporation New South Wales. And that smell lasts for about 10 to 12 days of an obnoxious smell that would turn most people's stomachs. Now the disability I suffer from is irritable bowel syndrome, which means my stomach is deeply affected most of the times. And in managing my disability, it's a great deal in managing my nausea and all those sorts of things with my stomach. And doing that under the conditions of living with decomposing animals is just very, very hard. Can we just pause it for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
You're not the fucking centre of attention every fucking moment. Well, that's the way it is. I can move out.
You had a neighbour, Arthur.
Arthur, yeah, Arthur Tooney, who lived next door. He passed away. And at first we thought his decomposing body was another decomposing rat. And of course, as I do each time, I complain to housing about the smell. In the optimism they'll rehouse me until the time the smell goes away, which would be the appropriate action, of course, to look after your tenant. Of course, they don't do that. What they do is fob you off from the time you report it, come round to your house 10 or 12 days after you've reported it and go, I can't smell anything. In the meantime, you've got to live with a decomposing rat. That's the way housing likes to play it. In this instance, the smell didn't go away. In fact, it got worse after 12 days, which made me then realise it was my neighbour. It still took me 4 or 5 days to get housing to react to that fact, to check on my neighbour. So eventually, myself and the rest of my tenants in the building had to put up with the smell of a decomposing body for 21 days before housing acted. We finished up in a wheelchair after he lost both of his legs from about the knee down, I think. And then finished up in a wheelchair. Now those set of stairs that you walk down to get into this place, every time Arthur had to leave the building, he would have to get out of his wheelchair, drag himself up those stairs, drag the wheelchair up behind him, put himself back into the wheelchair, open that big heavy door you came through, get himself back into the wheelchair again, set it up outside, and then he'd be able to leave. Coming back into his flat, he'd have to buzz himself through the door, get out of his wheelchair, disassemble it again, put it inside, hold the heavy door open, slide himself in on his bum, get back into the wheelchair, and then he would turn the wheelchair backwards and roll down those stairs backwards, hanging onto the rail. Now, this is how he entered and left his home for the 5 years he was living here. Now, housing was supposed to be assisting him by getting him a transfer. Because quite simply, and I can show you when we walk outside, if you go to his bedroom window at the front, they could have made that window into a door, which is at the ground level. So he could have entered his house using his bedroom exit window turned into a door as his entry point to his building, which would have been at ground level, no dragging himself up and down stairs all the time. And he wouldn't have had to move. Quite simple. They refused to do that work. They said, oh no, it would change the aesthetics of the building from the street. So they spent the next fucking 5 years saying they were going to transfer him. And the frustration that poor guy went through in trying to get that transfer into a home that was more suitable for him was nearly impossible. And I watched him go down and down mentally. Because you imagine dragging yourself, that's how you've got to leave the house every day. Dragging yourself up a filthy set of stairs. Because housing is supposed to keep these lobbies clean, and they don't do that. And he was a meticulous dresser, he had nice clothes, so he had to drag himself up the dirty stairs every day and roll down. And I'd hear him sitting here, you'd hear this thump, 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 as the wheelchair would roll down those stairs. And occasionally I heard him come a cropper down there. And quite often I'd imagine him rolling fucking straight into my front door at some stage and seriously injuring himself. Fortunately that never happened. But the mental anguish of having to live like that, I think, wore Arthur down. Now, I don't know if it was suicide in the end, or a drug overdose, or a matter of all those things, all the above, is what caused Arthur's end. But the question I ask is, 5 years ago, when he first realised that this was untenable, if they'd have made his bedroom window into a door, and he was continued to live a normal life, he might have been able to get over his disability. He might have been not ground down to feeling he's worthless. And you know, what sort of mental state does that leave somebody in? We had another tenant passed away in Suicide Towers about a month before the situation with Arthur. And the tenants there were ringing housing for 12 days telling them, not it was a dead rat, it was this tenant dead in his flat. And they fobbed all those tenants off as well. And eventually they went in 12 days later and there was the guy decomposing in his flat with his dead dog next to him decomposing. So, and you know, you think that would bring their attention to the situation to start looking at a nurse going around to look in on tenants that are suffering from these sorts of problems. So this doesn't happen again. Absolutely nothing done about it. Denial about whether they treated Arthur properly or not, and hopefully if they can ride the story out with the ABC and the public reaction, it'll go under the carpet and no one will notice and it'll be business as usual. You know, I now wonder, as a lot of my tenants do, a lot of my neighbours do, and I've had these conversations with them, is this the way our existence ends? Is this the way I'm going to pass away? That one day I'll be a horrible smell for my neighbours and it'll have to get that bad before housing react, I reach a state of decomposition. And then I'm buried in the ground, housing coming completely clean my fat out, throw out all the artwork that you see around me, which is my own artwork. It would wind up in landfill. There'd be years of my life and my work and my art going into landfill. No one would ever see it. You disappear without ever even, you know, it's like you didn't exist on the planet. Now, that's not really what you call a positive outlook on life, is it? You know, hope is pretty much removed from you at that stage. You know that you're going to be below the poverty line on the income that government offers you until the time that you die, which exempts you from most of the normal things that people can do. And at the end of it, you're going to die in your flat and wind up decomposing before your neighbours notice and all your stuff gets thrown into landfill.
What's your biggest fear?
That. Fucking that. I'd like to be recognised as an artist. No one's going to do that if all my fucking artwork winds up in landfill. Even, you know, like most artists think, you know, I'd like to be discovered, and some actually do get discovered after they die if they've got a body enough of work, and I can name you a few over the last few years that have done that. But of course that's not going to happen if my shit winds up in landfill.
If you could say anything to the people in the housing association, what would you say to them?
Fucking wake up to yourselves. You're on good fucking wages. You get a really nice big handout at the end of your life. Show some fucking compassion to the people that you deal with. Think about how your mother would go in that situation. Think if you had put that tenant through that fucking drama, if it was someone from your own family. Start to grow a fucking conscience about what you do every day when you go to work. Show some empathy to those at the most vulnerable in our society that you're dealing with on a daily basis. Don't treat them like they're in a fucking borstal or some sort of a fucking jail and treat them like a jailer. Speak to them with humanity, treat them with some respect, and stop them living in fucking deplorable conditions. Stop ignoring every day you go to work and bring it to your boss's attention. Do your fucking jobs. That's what I'd say to them.
So you've got a court case coming up on Tuesday. What are you fighting for?
Well, I'm going to try and take the government up to the Supreme Court to be held in contempt. And that's about the things I've been fighting for the last 5 years, which are related to what we've just been talking about, which are rubbish and rats. Now, the government has a responsibility to get rid of the rubbish that's created in their estates as a landlord. Right? Now, it's even more so in the fact with housing because, again, you're dealing with people with health issues. People that are elderly. They can't be carrying rubbish bags to drop-off points. They can't be taking bags of rubbish out to bins that are supposed to be there and they're not there. They're not going to carry them up 3 flights of stairs again at home and wait till housing finally get a fucking bin in the garden so they can put it away. They're going to leave it in the front yard. And of course, rats feed off that. So if this continual dereliction of your waste management continues, you have a rat problem. And we've got a rat problem here like you wouldn't fucking believe. As I said, I have to live with probably about 7 decomposing rats under my floorboards or in my cavity walls on a yearly basis. If that doesn't tell you something's fucking wrong. Now, of course, I've taken them to court and won things in court that they've had to do. At one stage, I forced them to do an independent study of their waste management system. And they came back with a massive fucking fail. 2/3 below the capacity of the waste they're supposed to move off these estates wasn't being moved. That means it sits here. That means it sits blocked in the rubbish heaps, stinking out the buildings, feeding the fucking rats. It's like living in Indonesia, like living in downtown Bangkok.
And how do you fight a case with like such a lack of resources? At the end of the day, they have more resources than you do.
With a hope and a prayer, basically. You know, you're right. No, I got no resources apart from my pension. I got to pay for. Look at the brief behind you. There's 4 volumes. There's $500 worth of printing there, which I have to do 3 times over. One for the court, one for housing, and one for me. So the costs in this matter alone is probably about $600 to $700 that nobody gives me back. That comes out of my fucking pension. So you're right. It's you know, you're not supposed to be able to win in this court, really. Although it's set out as a level playing field, it's not. And whereas my learned friend who went to university, in the next case, the solicitor I'll be up against, went to uni, passed his bar exam, has probably been doing this for some years and has great experience in his field, I'm up against him with no resources.
So what keeps you going?
I can't stand. I've always been a battler for a little guy, the underdog. And I guess since I've been an underdog, it's even more exemplified. And what I can't fucking stand is a society when there's so much money going around, where there's so much fucking wealth at the top, and I'm watching people living in dehumanising situations, getting polite people fucking smiling at you saying, sorry dear, that's the way you have to live, go away when you complain. Like any fucking normal person, I reached a point where I just fucking snapped and went, no, fuck this. There must be a better way. Now, we're supposed to, this court set up for us to see if we can get some justice. All right, I'll fucking file a claim for $13 and argue it out with these fucking smart asses that went to university and see how I go. Well, apparently I'm pretty fucking good at it.
How important is Tuesday to you winning the court case?
It's massive. It's virtually impossible. But that's not holding me back. And unless I'm even some degree successful, I'm going to have to keep living up to the smell of rubbish, the smell of decomposing rats, the worry of a rat getting into my flat and killing my birds. I don't want that to happen, because I can tell you right fucking now, the government will be responsible for that, and I will fucking snap. And what you'll have on your hands then is one psychotic motherfucker that will be looking for vengeance. So to avoid all that, I'd like to go to court under their fucking system and try and fix it.
What do you think your future here looks like?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. In some ways you could call me being selfish by trying to fix up all this shit. Because I realise with my health in the next 5 to 10 years, as I do dissipate from the planet, it's not going to be good. I'm going to need more care and more help. Now, if I have to live with rats under my fucking floorboards and all that sort of thing, when I'm unable to be able to fight for myself, I don't want to go through that. So what I'm trying to do is, and that's impossible really, to change a whole system so that I won't have to suffer that, but at least maybe I can fix the infrastructure of my flat and winning it in court cases. So that's good for the next 10 years. So at least while I'm lying here dying and vomiting and suffering, I don't have to worry about a rat going through my floors and killing my pets.